the two styles of fuel pumps that were used on the fuel-injected Mercedes during the 1960s and the very early 1970s. This showed up on the 6.3 model. It was not on the 3.5 or 4.5. And one of the more common problems with these pumps, short of complete failure, is fuel leaks. A lot of times they'll leak out the bottom of this plate. They'll leak out through here. They'll leak out through here. There's O-rings throughout. And what happens, and you're going to see it here, this is the early style long pump. Look at this O-ring. I'm going to have to dig this out with a pick tool. It's totally flat, has no spring to it. So if you have these old O-rings in these pumps, they're going to end up leaking, even if the screws are tight. Even if the plate is tight as you can get it, it's not going to seal up against this old hardened O-ring. First, you have to determine what pump you have. This is called a long pump. This is called a short pump. This was the pump that was in the late 50s. This is identical to the pump that is in my 59 220 SE. Around 1966, 67, they went to the short pump. And it's completely different inside. And I know some of you are wondering, well, how do I tell if I have a long pump or a short pump? I can't really see clearly under the car. We describe the difference on my website, but I'm going to show you one thing you can check by just looking under your car. The long pump has a shock mount system that is this big round rubber ring that fits over the pump, and then you have this big clamp. So if you look up under your car and you see this right here, and you see the big clamp that holds it in place, notice the rubber's still soft. This is still good in good condition. Then you have the long pump. If you look under your car and you see these are these little rubber mounts. There's 3 of them, they're screwed in. So if you see the pump supported by this type of mount, then you have a short pump. Now I do have a complete overhaul kit. I don't want to call it an overhaul kit because it's basically a reseal and refurbishing kit. You still have to have a good running motor. The kit includes new brushes and O-rings and so on to reseal it and to get new brushes into the motor. And this requires complete disassembly. Unfortunately, I don't have anything available for the long pump other than the bottom O-ring, because guess what? You look at these two pumps and this bottom O-ring fits on both the long pump and the short pump. And I even have a kit which is called Free Up Your Stuck Fuel Pump Kit. Both of them will sit with old fuel in them, and this vein will get all gummed up with old fuel and varnish, and it will stick to the plate. And you go to turn your ignition on, no pump, no fuel, no engine start. And you can always check this by turning your key on, going back and listening to hear if your pump is running. If it's not, you either have a failed pump, a blown fuse, or you have this issue where the veins get stuck on the plate. Note that both of the pumps have plates right on the bottom that are held on by 6 screws. And I'm going to show you what's inside of those plates if you haven't seen this before. When you remove the plate, there's an impeller in here, and this impeller is driven by the motor, and that's what moves the fuel. The impellers are slightly different. It's a little bit smaller, a little bit thicker on the long pumps, but you have the same situation there. You remove this plate and you'll find this impeller. Well, guess what happens when you let the car sit for a couple months and you're using ethanol-based fuels? Well, a lot of times what happens is that fuel starts to deteriorate with ethanol, and it forms some scum on the plate. And this is such a tight clearance on the impeller that that scum will keep the impeller from turning. Now, I don't know how many pumps I've pulled apart over the years, and this is a problem. But I just want you to be aware of this, because sometimes it's a very easy fix. You're either going to have to drain your fuel out or clamp off your hose, pull the bottom plate off, clean everything up, put it back together, and it's going to fire right up. Over the 20 years I've owned my 1959 220 SE, I think 3 times I've had to remove the plate and clean the impeller. Now, I don't drive the car that much. You know, some of that's my fault. I should be driving it every 30 days. But that's all it takes. Just pull the plate off. Clean the impeller, clean the plates, and put it back together and you're on your way. But there's one problem. And what is that problem? When you pull the plate off, there's an O-ring seal that goes right here. And guess what? You try to put this plate back on without changing the seal, and you're going to have leaks. I can guarantee it. And do not, I'm going to repeat it twice. Do not use any type of sealant on this O-ring. You say, well, I'll just put some sealant on it because I don't have a replacement O-ring. That sealant, whether you use Aviation Permatex, RTV, whatever, that sealant will work its way out of the edge here and eventually cause your impeller to seize again. So you don't want to try to reseal these O-rings once you remove the plate. I'm going to show you one now that I pull the plate off and you can see what happens to these O-rings over time. Even if you replaced the O-ring a couple years ago and it's still soft, if you look at it, it's been flattened out. So if you try to reinstall it, it's going to leak out of that plate. A lot of times you'll pull the plate off and these O-rings are hard, literally almost like cement. It's amazing. This one's just breaking out in pieces. This one is actually going to be pretty hard to get out. It's kind of soft, but no, it's not. So just get a real fine pick like you see here, and you can pick away at this and eventually get it out. Be real careful not to damage the groove here. If you damage the groove here, then you're going to cause a leak. And I know what you're saying, well, Kent, where do I get these O-rings? You know, you guys have a complete kit, but I don't need a complete kit. I just need an O-ring. So the other day I got thinking about this dilemma, because I have a couple of these cars too. Happier, my 280 SL has this short pump. I just decided, okay, it's time to come up with a little kit for those of you who maintain your old fuel-injected Mercedes-Benzes. And let me explain what this kit includes. The 3 O-rings, I'm going to include some cleaning supplies. You'll get a couple of plastic razor blades. Do not use any type of metal when you're cleaning the inside of this. Just use plastic. You do not want to scratch this. It will affect performance. And then I'm going to include some Scotch-Brite pads so that you can clean the scum off of this. What I'm going to recommend is you add a little engine oil to the Scotch-Brite and just use a light circular motion to clean that off, because you don't want to put any additional scratches in the plate here or inside this lower housing. So you can see I'm just using a light circular motion with the Scotch-Brite, and you can see how nicely that cleans all that scum off. There's ethanol in most of the gasoline you purchase at the pumps. And when the gas gets old and part of the gasoline evaporates off, this stuff gets really nasty. And I've seen it swell and even eat through rubber. Now these O-rings here are nitrile. Nitrile is supposed to be, resistant from fuel, but it's not resistant from this type of fuel. I'm just going to take this O-ring and set it right in here like this, and we'll come back, and I think you're going to be surprised at what happened to that rubber. I got ready to go home and I took a look at this. You can see some of that gasoline is already evaporated. And I realized by looking at this, I didn't even need to wait to show you what I'm trying to demonstrate here. Okay, take a look. Look what it did to the O-ring. It actually swells up the rubber. So let's take another go at this. This is a brand new O-ring. I've got another one here so we can compare the diameter of these. I don't have much of this nasty fuel left, but I'm going to coat this with a special full synthetic lubricant here, and let's see if this lubricant will keep the fuel from penetrating the rubber and causing it to swell. So I'm going to stick this into that can, and we'll come back tomorrow morning and take a look at this. Almost all the gasoline has evaporated off. That's probably mostly ethanol and varnish right there. Now let's take it out and let's see if that has protected this O-ring from swelling. Okay, here's a new one. Let's compare. Look at that. Same size. So I'm going to start including this in my kits and recommend that everyone who's rebuilding these pumps go ahead and put this O-ring special lube on. And when you do put it on, you don't need very much, but I'll just demonstrate what you want to do. You want to take it in your finger and thumb and really work it into the rubber. Just roll it back like this. Eventually, you're going to see the excess is going to come off in your fingers, but you want to work it into the rubber. So when you install this in your fuel pump, not only is this going to protect the O-ring, but it's going to help this O-ring seat to help prevent any leaks. If you have one of these short pumps and you do replace that lower O-ring, go back to fire up your car and it's running, be sure and go back and check to make sure there's no leaks in this pump. It's pretty common because there's an O-ring right in here, there's an O-ring right in here, and there's a couple O-rings right in here. And if you're experiencing leaks out of this area, or this area right here, then you'll need to get my complete resealing kit. And I'll also put a link in the description below the video that'll take you to that product and explain more about what's entailed in getting your pump completely apart and completely redoing it. So I hope you find that helpful. If you want to get one of these kits, I'll just put a link in the description below this video. Just put it in the trunk of your old Benz and it will always be handy when some morning you wake up and your pump will not turn over.